There's a warehouse in rural Ohio with no sign on the highway. No website, no hours posted online. You find it because someone in a buggy told you where to turn. Inside, the ceiling is stacked to 12 feet with 50-pound sacks of flour, wheels of cheese the size of tractor tires, and barrels of honey you scoop yourself. There's no music playing, no self-checkout, just the sound of canning jars clinking into cardboard boxes and a woman behind a hand-cranked scale doing the math in her head faster than the register could. This is a bulk store, and for something close to 400,000 Amish across North America, it is where almost all their food comes from. Not the grocery chain 20 minutes away, not a delivery app, a building most English, that's what the Amish call the rest of us, will drive past their whole lives and never once notice. To understand why this system exists and why it's quietly becoming one of the most efficient food networks in the country, you have to start with a number most people get wrong. The average Amish household is large. 6, 7, sometimes 10 children isn't unusual. Feeding a family that size 3 times a day, every day, on a farmer's income breaks a normal grocery budget fast. A single trip to a regular supermarket for a family that size can run $400–500 a week if you're buying in the small packages most stores are built around. That math doesn't work. So the Amish didn't try to make it work inside the system that produced it. They built a different one. The bulk store is the answer. And it didn't come from nowhere. It grew directly out of something older, something almost every Amish community still runs in some form: the food co-op. Long before there was a building with a hitching post out front, there were groups of families pooling orders. One family needed 100 pounds of oats, another needed the same, a third needed sugar, another needed cornmeal. Instead of 6 farmers each driving a wagon into town for 6 small purchases, one person collected everyone's list, made a single large order from a wholesaler, and split it up when it arrived. Everybody paid closer to the wholesale price instead of the retail one. That's the seed the whole system grew from. It's the same logic a warehouse club runs on. The Amish were doing it with horse and buggy before Costco existed. As Amish populations grew, especially the fast-growing settlements in places like Holmes County, Ohio, and areas of Pennsylvania and Indiana, informal co-ops turned into something more permanent. A family with a big barn or an old dairy building would set it up as a standing bulk store. Now you didn't have to wait for a group order. You could walk in any weekday and buy exactly what you needed, at close to wholesale, whenever you needed it. That's the piece worth sitting with for a second, because it explains almost everything else in this video. A bulk store isn't a specialty shop for a niche product. It's the Amish version of a supermarket, built for cash-based, large family, farm-adjacent living, run by and for the community that uses it. So what's actually inside one? Walk through the door and the first thing that hits you is scale. Not size of the building necessarily, some are barely bigger than a 2-car garage, but scale of the packaging. Flour doesn't come in 5-pound bags, it comes in 25 and 50-pound sacks. Sugar the same. Rice, oats, cornmeal, all sold in quantities meant to last a family a month or more, not a week. Prices are usually chalked or penciled onto a card, not printed. Somebody updates them by hand when a wholesale order comes in at a different rate than last month. There's no barcode scanner squaring things up automatically. If the price of oats went up 8 cents a pound because a supplier's truck costs more to run this year, that gets written on a new card and taped over the old one. It's slower than a chain store's system. It's also honest in a way a chain store's pricing algorithm rarely is, because the person writing the number on the card is usually the same person who's going to sell it to you at the counter 20 minutes later. Then there's the bulk bin wall, rows of gravity bins holding dried beans, lentils, rice, granola, trail mix, spices by the pound instead of the jar. You bring your own containers if you want, or scoop into a paper sack and pay by weight. No brand names shouting at you from the shelf. Most of what's in those bins doesn't have a logo at all. Dairy is its own section, and it's a big one, because a lot of these stores sit near Amish dairy farms and cheese houses. Blocks of cheese that weigh what a newborn weighs, butter by the pound, not the stick. Some stores carry raw milk, where state law allows it, sold directly from a neighbouring farm. Then there's the pantry wall that looks almost nothing like a chain grocery store. Shelf after shelf of home canned goods. Green beans, tomatoes, applesauce, pickles, jams, all put up by local families and sold on consignment. This is the part that surprises most outsiders who wander in. A meaningful share of what's on the shelf wasn't shipped in from a distributor. It was canned in someone's kitchen down the road and dropped off that week. And then, near the register, almost every bulk store has a candy and snack section that's disproportionately large for how small the rest of the store is. Bulk candy by the pound is one of the highest margin items in the building, and it's often the first thing kids run to. Even a community built around thrift and self-sufficiency still knows how to sell to a 9-year-old with $1 in her pocket. What you will not find in almost any of these stores is much of anything processed, pre-packaged or brand-driven the way a normal grocery aisle is. No wall of cereal boxes with cartoon mascots, no freezer case of ready meals. The entire layout is built around one assumption. The person shopping here is going to cook, bake, and preserve, not heat something up. The rhythm of the store changes with the season too, and that's something a regular supermarket, stocked identically in July and January, doesn't really have. Come August and September, the shelves near the door fill up with cases of empty canning jars, boxes of lids, and pallets of sugar, because that's canning season, and every family in the settlement is putting up produce for the winter at the same time. A bulk store owner who doesn't stock enough sugar and jar lids in late summer will hear about it fast. By November, the same shelf space might be given over to baking supplies for the holidays, cocoa, spices, dried fruit, because that's what the calendar of a farm household actually demands that month. The inventory isn't static. It tracks the work families are doing in their own kitchens, week by week. That assumption is the real engine behind the whole system, and it's worth explaining why it holds. Amish households are still, overwhelmingly, one-income farm or trade households, where the wife runs the kitchen as close to a full-time operation, baking bread most days, canning through the summer and fall, making meals from raw ingredients because that's both the tradition and the budget. A bulk store isn't selling convenience, it's selling raw material at the lowest possible price per pound to people who are going to do the actual work of turning it into food themselves. That's also why the pricing works the way it does. A bulk store operates on volume and low overhead, not on margin per item. No advertising budget, no loyalty app, often no card reader at all. Plenty still run cash only. The building itself is frequently a converted barn or an addition onto a family home, so there's no commercial lease eating into the price of a sack of flour. Every dollar that a regular grocery chain spends on marketing, on a fully staffed deli counter, on a parking lot lit up at night, is a dollar the bulk store simply doesn't spend. That saved overhead shows up directly as a lower shelf price. There's a broader pattern underneath all of this, and once you see it, you start noticing it everywhere in Amish life. The community doesn't reject modern efficiency. It rejects the parts of modern systems that create dependency, debt, or disconnection from the people around you. A bulk store still uses wholesale purchasing, still uses volume pricing, still runs on the same math a big box retailer runs on. What it strips out is everything that isn't the food itself, and everything that would tie the family to a bank loan, a corporate supply chain, or a system they don't control. Payment inside these stores looks different too, and it's worth explaining because it ties directly back to the debt avoidance point. Plenty of bulk stores are cash or check only, no card machine at all, and some keep a running tab for families they've known for 20 years, settled up monthly instead of item by item. That only works because the store owner and the customer are going to see each other at church in 3 days, at a wedding next month, at the same auction next spring. The accountability isn't a credit score, it's the fact that everybody involved will keep running into each other for the rest of their lives. That's also why so many bulk stores are family run, and why running one has become its own small industry inside these communities. A family that starts a bulk store isn't just solving their own shopping problem, they're creating a business that other Amish families can work at, supply into through their canning and cheese making, and buy from without ever leaving the community's own economy. Money that would have left the settlement, going to a supermarket chain headquartered somewhere else entirely, instead moves from one Amish household to another. The dollar just gets recirculated inside the community instead of leaking out of it. That recirculation is a bigger deal than it sounds. Rural Amish settlements, especially the newer ones spreading into states like Kentucky, Wisconsin, and upstate New York, often exist in areas with limited grocery access to begin with, places researchers would flag as food deserts for the broader population. A bulk store built by and for the Amish community frequently ends up being one of the more reliable food sources in the entire area, sometimes serving non-Amish neighbours too, once word gets around about the prices. And prices are exactly why English shoppers have started finding these stores at all. Word travels slowly because most bulk stores don't advertise, don't run a website, and don't want a highway sign pulling in traffic from an hour away. But it travels. A homesteading family looking to fill a chest freezer for the winter, a large family trying to cut a grocery bill, a baker who needs flour by the sack instead of the bag. They hear about the Amish store from a neighbour, and once they've been in once, they rarely go back to paying retail for the same ingredients. That word-of-mouth only model is deliberate, not an accident of Amish life being private. A bulk store that stayed a purely local, low-traffic operation keeps its prices low because its overhead stays low. The moment it becomes a destination, a parking lot, a staff of 10, a marketing plan, it starts turning into the very system it was built to be an alternative to. So most stay small on purpose. Success in this world doesn't look like growth. It looks like staying exactly efficient enough to keep serving the families down the road. Which brings us back to where we started. 400,000 people, give or take, feeding families that often run twice the size of the national average, almost entirely outside the grocery system the rest of the country treats as unavoidable. Not through some austere sacrifice, through a well-built alternative, one that started as neighbours pooling a wagon order and grew into a quiet, cash-based, community-owned supply chain that a lot of modern retail could actually learn something from. If you've ever wondered how a system built on horse and buggy manages to out-efficiency a system built on trucking networks and national distribution, that's the answer. It's not that the Amish are doing without, it's that they figured out, generations before anyone coined the term supply chain, that the shortest one is the one that never leaves your own community. I put together everything I know about how Amish communities actually run day to day, the bulk stores, the co-ops, the trades, the parts most outsiders never see, into one place called the Amish Almanac. The link's in the description, or scan the QR on screen if that's easier. Now, back to it. There's one more layer to this that most people, even the ones who've shopped at one of these stores, never think to ask about. Who decides what goes on the shelf? It's not a corporate buyer running numbers in an office 3 states away. It's usually the family that owns the store making a judgment call based on what their own community actually needs that month. If a nearby dairy has a surplus of a certain cheese, it shows up in bulk that week. If a local family put up an extra 100 jars of apple butter that fall, it goes on consignment at the front counter. The inventory of an Amish bulk store is less a fixed catalogue and more a living snapshot of what the settlement around it produced, grew and needed, updated by hand, week to week. That's a strange thing to say about a grocery store in an era where most of us buy food from a supply chain that stretches across 3 continents before it reaches a shelf. But it's also, when you think about it for more than a few seconds, closer to how food shopping worked for most of human history than anything you'll find at a big chain today, back before anyone needed a word like supply chain at all. There's also a quieter economic effect happening underneath all of this, one that rarely gets talked about outside the settlements themselves. $1 spent at a national grocery chain leaves the local economy almost immediately, off to a distribution centre, a corporate office, shareholders somewhere else entirely. $1 spent at a bulk store tends to stay close by for a long time. It pays the family running the store. Some of it pays the dairy down the road for cheese. Some of it pays the widow who canned 200 jars of green beans over the summer and dropped them off on consignment. That dollar might change hands 4 or 5 times inside the same few square miles before it ever leaves the community. And every time it changes hands, it's doing a little more work for the people who live there. Economists have a term for this, the local multiplier effect. And it's the same idea a lot of buy local campaigns in English towns are trying, often clumsily, to recreate. The Amish never needed a campaign. It's just how the bulk store system was built from day one. Whether that model could scale beyond these communities is a fair question, and probably an unanswerable one. It works because everyone involved already trusts each other, already shares the same rhythms of farm life, and already has a reason not to cut corners with a neighbour's cheese or a neighbour's flour. Strip that trust out, and you likely just get a regular discount grocer with worse lighting. You could hand a stranger the same 25-pound sacks, the same gravity bins, the same hand-lettered price cards, and it still wouldn't be a bulk store in the way these communities mean it. What actually makes the system work isn't the building or the pricing model. It's that the person weighing your cheese knows your name, and you'll be standing in line behind them at church on Sunday. Take that part out, and all you've built is a warehouse with worse lighting than the store down the road. But for the families actually living it, that's not really the point. The point was never to build a model the rest of the country could copy. The point was to feed a lot of children well, on a farmer's income, without owing anybody a loan for the privilege. Judging by how many of these stores are still standing, decades after the first one opened its doors, they solved that problem a long time ago. The rest of us are just now getting round to noticing. One hand-lettered price card, one sack of flour, one quiet county road at a time.